Jennifer, oh, never mind. Never mind. Oh, yeah, hold on. I cannot advance this slide. I'll take that. Hold on, I'm gonna try something else here. Okay, I think I'm just gonna have to do it like that so I can move it up and down.
Okay, it's 7:05 and we have a few people who have called in, so do we want to go ahead and get started?
I'm fine with that.
Oh, we have another one. Okay, Courtney, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Peoria Proud's Inquiry Teaching Webinar on Adoption. I'm Courtney Garrett. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your host for the evening. This ongoing series serves as a way to bring knowledgeable professionals to a wide audience on a host of different subjects concerning the LGBTQ plus community, and will be recorded for posterity. After the presentation, we'll open it up for Q&A. Tonight's topic is on adoption and how to navigate the process as a queer individual or family. Joining us to discuss this are two amazing individuals who work at the Children's Home Association of Illinois here. I'd like to start by providing some background on your presenters tonight. First, the Children's Home Association of Illinois has been providing care to at-risk children and families for over a century. It was originally formed in 1866 to provide relief to the poor through donated groceries, coal, clothing, and medicine. Over the years, it has evolved into the Children's Home we know today, operating from over 10 locations in the Peoria area and providing services to at-risk youth all over the state of Illinois. Children's Home provides services during pregnancy to at-risk mothers, as well as at-risk youth up to the age of 24, and responds to the needs ranging from homelessness, behavioral health services, social care, and placement services. First up, we have Mindy Weber, whose pronouns are she, her. Mindy has worked at the Children's Home for 31 years and has been working in the adoption field for 10 years. She was born and raised in Peoria, where she still resides. Mindy is a loving mom to an adult son and had her own adoption last year, where she adopted a 10-week-old child. In her free time, she enjoys...
Let me break in real quick.
Of course.
It was a puppy and not a child, but it still is my child. And she is very
That's
needy.
my bad. I said a 10-week-old rescue, and I was like, oh, well, you work in adoption. I'm going to say that's a child.
No, I did
It's
adopt.
just as exciting. I
It
love
still
that.
is my child for sure. And she's very needy, so she may rear her head in here every once in a while. But okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. So last year, where she adopted a 10-week-old child puppy.
Yes.
In her free time, she enjoys reading, spending time outdoors, and traveling. Thank you, Mindy, for joining us this evening.
Thank you for having me.
We will also be hearing from Jennifer Durbin, whose pronouns are she, her. Jennifer has worked in the social services field for her entire employment history. She's worked in a residential facility for delinquent mice, Peoria County Juvenile Detention Center, and foster care. Jennifer joined the Children's Home team about 2 years ago after leaving her prior employer of 17 years. Additionally, she has worked in the field of DCFS, or Department of Children and Family Services, adoptions and guardianships for 11 years. Jennifer is local to Pekin and has 2 adult sons. In her free time, she enjoys baking, crafting, and gardening. Thank you, Jennifer, for joining us tonight. I feel like the 3 of us would get really quite along with all the crafts and everything. We'll need to do something with that sometime. So I want to explain how this is going to work. So we're going to hand this over to our speakers. They're going to be able to share their knowledge and experiences with us. And during this time, we ask that you all please keep your microphones muted. And after their presentations, we will open this up for questions. So with that, we are going to hand this over to the 2 of you.
Thank you. Like Courtney said, my name is Mindy Weber. I've been at Children's Home for over 30 years, working in adoptions, have completed numerous adoptions. I know adoption is a big thing in the LGBTQ plus community, especially when one partner has children and they get together with someone else and then that partner wants to adopt. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but mainly Jennifer and I's expertise or area of expertise is with foster care converting to adoption. So that's kind of, we'll go into that probably a little bit more than anything, because believe me, we are in desperate need of foster parents at this time. And as I was coming up with this presentation, not only was I looking at fostering and adopting with the LGBTQ plus community, but I also kind of want to focus also on the needs of LGBTQ youth that are in care, because that is a dire need to provide care for those children as well. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get into that aspect of it first. It's still not going to let me advance. Jennifer. See here, hold on. I don't know why it's not going to let me advance it.
It says to use the space bar, the mouse, or the arrows.
I also have it pulled up on my screen if you want me to present.
That might be helpful.
Okay.
I am not the most tech savvy person. Oh, there we go. Thank you, River. Thank you. That was River that did that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Jennifer is asking to be, can you not unmute yourself? Don't know. I'm going to go ahead and keep going, and we'll hopefully figure that out.
Okay.
So
I don't have the option to unmute Jennifer. We'll go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to continue on. So in regards to our LGBTQ plus youth in foster care, research shows that there are 13.6% LGBTQ identified youth in care and foster care compared to 7.2% in the general population youth. So there is a greater need for LGBTQ youth to be cared for. Most placements in general for foster care are due to abuse and neglect. And you can kind of go a little bit further with that neglect and say that a lot of LGBTQ youth that are placed in care, a lot of times that is a result of their being rejected by family and loved ones. They also sometimes do not get the care that they are needing and deserve. And so that kind of puts a family disruption in within those children. There's also, once they come into care, things are hopefully changing, but there is a lot of bias and prejudice towards these children in care. As you can see on there, it says that they're more likely to face placement disruptions. I found one statistics that says that most LGBTQ youth in care average 6.35 placements while they're in care, to where the normal average, not normal, but just average youth in care averages 3 placements. So there's a greater risk of placement disruption with our LGBTQ youth. Like I said, as much as we want times to change, and I think they are, I think there is still bias with these kids in care when they're placed with families that don't quite understand their needs. And that does cause greater placement disruption. And so I think it's very important that we get families and parents that are willing to support these children and love these children and accept them for who they are and to get the help that they deserve. Whether that be psychological, gender affirmation care, or whatnot, these kids need to have their beliefs, their values, their person valued and loved just as much as any other children and any other child in care. So I don't know how to advance the slides now, so River, you might need to do that. Oh, there it is. Okay. Jennifer, do you want to take over? Or do you want me to keep going?
You can still go on. That's fine.
Okay. Fortunately, we are in a state where we can complain about Illinois and its cold winters and bad roads, whatever. Fortunately, we are in a state and do have a governor that fully supports LGBTQ plus rights, especially with our youth in care. In 2023, Pritzker did enact laws that protect those youth in care. They've provided resources for those kids. They're legally, we are, DCFS and private agencies are legally obligated to provide services for these children. We've also they have mandated training to better understand LGBTQ youth and their needs. And so everybody within DCFS and the private agencies have taken that training. Pritzker's very adamant about making sure that these kids receive the care that they need, which is, to me, fantastic because we don't have a lot of states that support that still. And so the fact that he does recognize it and does mandate that these children get the care they need is, to me, super important. And I'm glad we're where we're at in this state with that. Which moves us to Every Child Deserves a Family Act, which is now federal, basically saying that a child, you cannot discriminate placement in a home based on gender, sex, religion, race, whatever. We cannot look at a child and say, oh, well, they go to this kind of home. There's no discrimination when it comes to finding placements for getting forever homes for these kids. Now, like I was saying, with LGBTQ plus community, some of these parents don't accept them or readily accept them as much, just to be blunt and honest. And so it is important to have parents and foster parents that accept those children into their homes and love them and get them the care that they need. So that's always it's one thing I do appreciate Illinois for. So okay, I still can't move the slides. Okay, I'm just going to read through this. Since 1995, the state of Illinois has recognized the right for LGBTQ plus singles and same-sex couples to adopt, just like all other Illinois residents. Under Illinois law, adoption decisions are based primarily on whether the adoption is within the best interest of the child, which is basically when you're in juvenile court or family court, that's what they're always going to base their decision on, is what's in the best interest of the child. Illinois has been a leader in providing fair and equal rights for the LGBTQ community, and its laws on adoption are different. In fact, Illinois not only allows single LGBTQ individuals as well as same-sex couples to adopt, the state also allows same-sex partners to engage in second parent adoptions. So you don't have to be married. If one partner already has children, you don't have to be married for that other partner to adopt. If you're fostering, you don't have to be married to adopt. You can, one or both can still adopt, and there's no discrimination based on it in the state of Illinois. I know it's different in other states, but in Illinois, you have the right to adopt whether they're married or just in a partnership. So, moving on, in Illinois, it allows that an adult over the age of 18 can petition to adopt a child. Married couples can petition to adopt jointly. Unmarried couples can petition to adopt jointly. A married person to adopt the child of their spouse, and unmarried couples to petition for second parent adoption. And that's whether it's a heterosexual or homosexual couple. Those are all included under the law in Illinois. Moving on. Just some facts about LGBTQ fostering and adoption for those that may be interested in fostering and adopting. I'm just going to kind of go through some of these. Although the 1 million same-sex couple households in the United States make up less than 2% of total coupled households, 21% of same-sex couples with children have adopted children versus less than 3% of opposite-sex couples with children. Same-sex couples are 7 times more likely than opposite-sex couples to have adopted children. Now, that includes having a partner and then also the other partner adopting, but it also goes towards your foster care numbers also. The number of children living with LGBTQ parents has risen tremendously. These numbers will only increase as same-sex adoption and parenting becomes more widely accepted. An estimated 2 million LGBTQ plus people are interested in adopting. Over 43% of same-sex couples have adopted or have stepchildren versus about 10% of opposite-sex households. Same-sex couples are 4 times more likely than opposite-sex couples to have adopted children or stepchildren, and LGBTQ plus adoptive parents are more likely to adopt transracially. Just kind of going back on the racial disparity of children in foster care, there are significantly more Black children in care. Can kind of go towards that whole same bias and prejudice type thing. But we're seeing that the LGBTQ community will love them and accept them and adopt more often than heterosexual couples with the different races. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Jennifer now because she is going to kind of discuss just kind of the process of becoming a foster parent and adopting. Like I said, there are private adoptions, especially if one partner has children already, and you can do private options that way. Jennifer, I think, Jennifer, have you done private adoptions at all?
Not lately, no.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah, so basically what we're going to go through is the process of becoming a foster parent and then how that can possibly convert to adoptions. So I'm going to let Jennifer go.
Okay. Again, my name is Jennifer Durbin, and thank you for allowing us to come speak to your group this evening. Fostering with DCFS is a beast within itself, I guess. I don't know, because you have a lot of different entities involved, in this process. You can either be a foster parent with a private agency, or you can be a foster parent with DCFS. There are several other private agencies in the Peoria area that you can look into as well. Children's Home, like I said, we've been here over 150 years, so we have a good reputation in the community for caring for kids and families. The process starts with an inquiry. They're calling our agency or talking to somebody specifically, about what's involved with being a foster parent, and we would then, of course, refer you to our licensing unit, who could take you through that step, the process of that. But it entails, education, taking courses, having the worker come into your home, making sure that there's enough room, adequate room for yourself and the child or children that you want to see placed with you. They get out measuring tapes, to measure rooms and space available. They take your water temperature to make sure it's not too hot or too cold. They take a look at the whole house, making sure that there is no nothing that could hurt any child or anybody else in the home. Take a look if you have pets. They take a look at pets and look at immunizations, make sure they're up on all their vaccines and shots and things like that. And then take a look at the community, the landscape of your property, if it's fenced in, to help with keeping kids in or out, that type of thing. That process, it just varies on how long that process can take, depending on your availability and the workers' availability, to come see the home or interview you. All kinds of paperwork. We need all kinds of background information on the people pursuing the foster care license. We need to know your background, how you were raised, your education, employment, financial history, and kind of information you want to share, because we have to write up that report, and then that goes on to DCFS, who is our watchdog, to make sure we're meeting, all of the needs, the foster home. They then, allow the license to go through, or they would kick back and have more questions that need to be answered. And then you can also let them know what kind of children would fit best in your home. Boys, girls, ages, sibling groups, singles, that type of thing. You have that opportunity to let them know. What happens when a child comes into care, DCFS is a state facility. They then go through the list of private agencies to see who can get, responsibility for this case. And then if it would come to us, then we would have to find a home who's eligible, to take this child or children. So that would start that process of foster care. The foster parent will again, be educated on the process. Unfortunately, sometimes we don't have that much information on kids when brought into care because it could be emergency placement. Something just happened. We know nothing about the kids. So, foster parents have to be open and willing to understand the traumas that these children may have been through, and to know that anything might trigger them, with behaviors or something that they'll have to deal with and work through with the children. Let's see. The foster parents come in with the expectation that they know this is a temporary thing, that we want the children to return home if that is in their best interest. The parents have anywhere from 9 to 12 months to correct the conditions that brought the kids into care. So they still have that opportunity to have the kids returned home to them with the help of the foster care worker. The foster care worker helps them with any services that they need, substance abuse, counseling, any domestic violence, any kind of services that they would need. That's what the foster care worker, sets them up with and helps them to achieve those goals if that is how they want to pursue that. In the event that the parents do not complete those services in that time frame, the court then can file a petition to terminate parental rights, thus leaving the children free for adoption. And for the most part, that would then go to the foster parent, because the foster parent has that opportunity, to now adopt these kids because they've been in their care for a good amount of time. They know the kids. If they fit well into their family, this would be the ultimate end, for those kids to be at a permanent home and finding a family. The adoption process in itself, sometimes these kids are in foster care, 2 years, 2.5, 3 years. So we try to make it, possible that we can get these kids forever homes fairly quickly. But of course, that's always, a wish, but sometimes hard to, come through. We do the same thing with the foster parents. We get all that information, the background, know who these people are, so that when we write reports to DCFS and to the court, they have an understanding of who these people are that want to adopt this child or children. We then do our home visits, and we go over subsidy documents that DCFS requires. We talk more, with the adoptive parents and get information from them, or if they have questions. We send everything to an attorney that's paid for by DCFS, because this is what's called a subsidized adoption, which means DCFS will pay the foster parent or adoptive parent a subsidy, a monthly subsidy, to raise this child until the child's 18 or otherwise graduate from high school. And they will also get a medical card for the child. So it's not like we leave everybody out, to fend for themselves. They do, get the medical card and subsidy to help raise this child to adulthood. Once we have all of the information, the people meet with the attorney, and that's paid for by DCFS as well. Then the attorney goes over everything and then sends everything back to our office. We send, and again, like I said, this is a process. We send everything then to DCFS for review. They have at least 2 other steps that they have to go through to approve this, which is good, because the more eyes on it, the more that it's going to be correct and things can't go wrong. So once it's approved by DCFS, then it comes back to our office, our unit, and then we take it back to the attorney, and then they file their petition and order of adoption for the child in whatever county. And it varies right now. Sometimes it's where the delinquency case originates, or sometimes it's where the caregivers reside, the county. You can adopt in any county that you want to, actually. However, you got to make sure that it's with a DCFS attorney, If not, you can go with your own private attorney. However, DCFS has a stipend of $2,250 that they'll pay, $2,250 that they'll pay. If it would go over more than that, then you would have to pay that remaining amount. So that's only if you use a private attorney who doesn't know DCFS. That's about it. Then the court hearing takes place. You can have anybody there that you want to. You are able to change the child's name, and you will get a new birth certificate with you as the parents and with the child's new name. Yeah, and I think that's it for that process. Then you have the ability to contact DCFS post-adoption unit if there's any additional services that you would need. If the child is requiring some counseling or additional medical, they're always there, to help guide you in the direction that you need to do. Set you up with a counselor who contracts with DCFS for post-adoption services. And we have booklets, of course, that we can give you with all this information, with post-adoption too. That'll help. I think the next slide. So these are just some basic terms for adoption. Adoptee is the child to be adopted. The adoption is the actual process. You have the adoptive parent, who would, in this case, be the foster parent converting to be an adoptive parent. Birth parent is the ones that gave birth, to the child. There's also a legal father sometimes who's in a situation. Sometimes they might not be the birth parent, but they've signed a voluntary acknowledgement of paternity, and the court has accepted them as the legal parent. Then the court would have to go and terminate those parental rights as well, leaving the child free for adoption. Closed adoption, that's what our adoption process is. That means that the parents are not supposed to be in contact with you. It shouldn't be. Sometimes that varies because if it's a healthy relationship, also, we like foster parents to be involved with parents, because if they don't return home, the kids would still have a relationship with those parents. And if it's a healthy relationship, we want to try to have another person that this child is able to talk with, and have a relationship with. Let's see. With foster care, that is, the process where a child's removed from the home. Home study is where either licensing or adoption units would get information about the adoptive parent or a potential foster home to be able to get licensed through DCFS. Legalization, that is just in regards to the adoption, and that's a legal process that cannot be changed. It's irrevocable with the adoptive parents, providing care for this child. Open adoption is where the person who was terminated would then also be allowed to visit with the child. This is a lot with relative placements because if you've got a grandparent raising the grandchild, their son or daughter is their parent. So, they still might be able to come around for family gatherings, things like that. Subsidized guardianship, that is where a child is cared for by a non-relative to have a permanent placement. And that process, the child's name does not change. And there is, like I said, there's no relative relationship. However, there can be like a fictive kin relationship. That would be sometimes like teachers or neighbors or anybody else that might have a relationship with the child prior to them coming into care. That would be a fictive kin situation. so that the child would still have a contact or somebody that they could have a relationship with or has a relationship with already. Reunification is when the parents are able to complete the court-ordered services and the children are reunited with the parents. There is, an aftercare program where they're checking on them, to make sure everything is good. I don't know what the statistics are right now for if there's any blown reunifications or where that fits into the whole scheme of things. But that is ultimately what we want to do, for these children, is to reunite them with their parents. Surrender parental rights, that's the parents, where they no longer want to have a relationship with their child, where they would surrender their parental rights, and that would then leave them free for adoption and or guardianship. And then termination of parental rights is where the court system would then terminate those parental rights if they were unable to complete those services and or surrender their parental rights, and then the court could then terminate at that point.
Before we move on to the next slide, I would just like to add, there is a difference between adoption and subsidized guardianship, whereas adoptions, parental rights have to either be surrendered or terminated. There can be no legal connection between the child and the parents. Whereas with a subsidized guardianship, the foster parent would become the guardian of that child and still get the subsidy payment, the medical card, but the parents still retain parental rights. So I always say it's better to go the adoption route, because then you're not going to have parents coming back being like, hey, I want to take guardianship back of my kid in the future. But sometimes it works better in some situations, especially with older kids, to do the subsidized guardianship, because they are going to maintain that relationship with their parent. And so that's kind of when we kind of go towards that route. But ideally, we like to see parental rights terminated, because it just makes things legally a lot clearer and simpler. I know Jennifer talked about legal fathers. Just buckle up if you're going to do foster care, because you're going to get some wild rides in there. There's a lot of children who we don't know who the fathers are, or the mother says it's this person, and then they DNA and it's not that person. I will say that the courts, because we've all heard the stories of, they terminate rights or do whatever, and a kid gets adopted, and then pretty soon Joe Blow comes and is like, hey, I think that's my kid. And we see kids being yanked out of adoptive homes. The courts have learned their lessons with this, and they cross their T's, dot their I's to make sure that any possible legal father, any possible putative father that the parent names, any biological father, anybody that's on the birth certificate, if they don't know who the father is, they go for fathers unknown. But they will make sure that any possible father is going to be terminated on, so that down the road, you're not going to have some man come and be like, oh yeah, that's my kid. So it just makes it a lot more clear cut to do an adoption over a guardianship, because you do know that those parental rights are severed. There is no legal relationship, and no one can come back and be like, I want my kid back. So that's why I always say, if we can do it, do the adoption, because it just is an easier legal process. So anyway, that's all I wanted to add. Jennifer, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. The next slide. So with our current state of affairs and our currents, I think we all know, and I'm not going to get political on here, but I think we all know where we're at in this country as far as things that are happening. I will say, how is that going to affect foster care or adoptions? I do know, like with private adoptions, it could be very different. I do know with foster care, like I said, Illinois is very supportive of LGBTQ plus youth in care, as well as LGBTQ plus foster parents and adoptive parents. I do know that there is talk that federal funding may be pulled from programs where there continue to be DEI and DEIB initiatives. Um, we know that Illinois is a very strong supporter of DEIB. Children's Home is a very strong supporter of DEIB and has a committee and does certain things. And I don't know how it's going to look, but there is potential that Fed funding will be cut to the state of Illinois or to Children's Home or any private agency that still practices any type of DEIB policies. And it doesn't just go for adoptions or foster care. I know we've already gotten emails saying there are some federally funded grant programs within Children's Home that we just don't know what that's going to look like. But just we're like, be prepared, because we just don't know how this is going to look a month from now, 6 months from now. You would think that there's no way that they could implement something like that, but at this point, I like never say never, because there's things that are happening that I never thought would. So even like with adoptions, when we do adoptions through foster care, one of the approval processes is that there's a federal funding program that for every adoption we do, we get federal funds for, that helps with the continued placement through adoption. And so hopefully that will continue, but it's just kind of remains to be seen how that's going to play out. So anyway, there's that. And before we get to questions, as I was going through like the facts of LGBTQ parents, I had on a paper, and I couldn't find it, but now I do. So I do want to go through this real quick. And this is a study from 2012. So it's rather old, and hopefully some of the statistics have changed for the better. But it says approximately 2 million children are being raised by LGBTQ parents, and that number is expected to grow. An estimated 14,000 foster children, or 3% of all foster children, currently live with lesbian and gay foster parents. Research suggests LGBTQ plus parents may be more willing than heterosexual parents to adopt children with special needs, which are among the most vulnerable and difficult to place. So I think that's important to see that, we have a community out there that is willing to help these children. The other thing, and like I said, I know I kind of started off with the LGBTQ plus children and or youth in care, and just without using names, give a slight example and just how the need is great is, we have one youth that is transitioning and is residing with a grandparent in a foster home, and it's taken a lot of work to get that foster parent to even accept that child. And if we could find homes where there's parents that are willing to access that gender affirming care, it would be wonderful. I mean, we need more of those kind of parents. And there's even this child has a brother that is going to move in with the grandparent, and that grandparent's like, well, they can come down too. And they're like, well, they're transitioning to be a male. And she's like, oh, no. So it's those kinds of instances where we need families that are willing to accept these children and love them and help them get the care that they need. And it's just, and we're in need of foster parents in general. But I think if we can gather up some support for people who really understand these kids, that would make a world of difference. So anyway, that's my spiel. Any questions or discussions that you want to have? Or Jennifer, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, not really.
Okay.
So for questions, first off, thank you for that. That was very, very nice. I love that. But we're going to open up to questions, and we're going to, you can either post it in the chat or if you want, we can call on you to unmute yourself if you raise your hand. See, Don has a question. If you want to go ahead and ask that, Don.
Hi, ladies. Actually, it not so much geared towards foster care and adoption. More of a question geared towards, the political climate that we're all going through. Our daughter was born before they added co-parent to the birth certificate. So my wife currently is not on our daughter's birth certificate, but our daughter has her last name. Do you have any guidance towards the procedures that we would need to go through to have her added to her birth certificate?
Is she a legal parent, or would she need to adopt first?
Well, depends on what you define as legal. I am a biological parent.
Okay.
She has raised her for the last 16 years. I mean, she was there at her birth. We conceived her together, all of those things.
Okay. Like I said, in Illinois, Illinois does accept the fact that there are, and I don't know if you're married or just.
We are.
Okay, so as a married couple, she can most definitely adopt her and change the name. Do you say she already has her last name?
She already has her last name. So she was born in 2009, just the year before they added co-parent to the birth certificate.
Right.
And of course, we weren't married then because it wasn't legal then. But she's already has her last name. So I didn't know, and there was no one that would answer the phone at the health department, so I couldn't ask the question there. And I was going to start there. I didn't know if I would start at the courthouse or exactly where to start, but she already has her last name. I was allowed to give her last name at
Right.
the time of birth. She wasn't allowed to sign the birth certificate.
Well, that's so frustrating to me for her. I would think, and I'm not sure, and Jennifer, I don't know if you have the answer to this either. I'm just going to be perfectly honest. I know she can go in and adopt. It would be a private adoption, and so you would have to use an attorney, and you would have to pay for that. And I know adoptions can be rather expensive. The fact that she is your biological daughter, it's not like you're going and adopting from an agency. So I don't think it would be near as expensive, but I think your best bet would be for her to adopt. And I know you could, and obviously then she would be put on the birth certificate. I'm not 100% sure if you can just add her to the birth certificate.
Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, is just to do a birth certificate amendment or what, or
Right.
the voluntary. I ran into today, there was some sort of voluntary, I don't know, assumption of paternity or whatever. Of course, when you say paternity, it means father, but
Right.
it's like, ugh, it's so disgusting to think that someone who's raised her for 16 years has to adopt her.
Absolutely. I could 100% agree. And that's, like I said, luckily Illinois is kind of stepping up and changing those laws. Unfortunately, obviously, it didn't happen before she was born. But I would contact Jennifer. What do you think? I would kind of start with maybe the county clerk at the courthouse and just see if you can just have her added to the birth certificate. And based on that, then I would say that, if you can do that, that would be fantastic. But then, like I said, there's always the route to actually, have her actually adopt, and then she would only be put on the birth certificate.
Yeah. And, you kick yourself in the ass, pardon my French, to not do this sooner, but it wasn't a concern until
I get it.
Our wonderful political climate at the moment. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
I know.
it's
Like
disgusting.
I said, I wasn't going to get political on here, but
I know. I have a
lot I
tendency to
could
get my
say.
soapbox,
I do
but
want to
it's-
try and keep this so that we
I
don't dive into the
no,
political
I
aspect.
understand, Courtney. I apologize. It's just gross and it's gut wrenching.
And I 100% fully support you and agree. And I just said I don't want to get political, but we all know that there's some real fears and concerns out there right now.
I think probably an amended birth certificate is what you ultimately want to just try first.
Okay.
And, I would say to the circuit clerk, and then they would probably refer you to maybe somebody down in Springfield.
And I mean, you may have to pay for that, but I don't think it would be, if they allow you to do that, you may have to, pay a fee, but I don't think it would be as much as having to do a private adoption.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds fair. Appreciate you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I do have a couple questions here. So one question is, can you describe the difference between the experience that an adoptive parent would have versus a foster parent would have? What are some key differences that you see between those?
Well, it just depends on the state where the stage is in the in the foster care process. Like I said, a foster parent tries to work with the birth parents, and then they also support, visitation with the parents. They are just filling in for the parents right now. Whereas after an adoption occurs, then they are the parent. They don't have to, maintain a visitation schedule with the birth parent. They aren't required to do anything with the birth parent. So after an adoption is finalized, they are the parent. They are the ones responsible for education, socialization, anything, mental health, anything like that. The adoptive parent is responsible for all that.
And I would just add to that too. I think the biggest difference is while you're still in that foster care process and you're just fostering the child, there is a huge unknown, because every child that enters into foster care is going to have some type of trauma background. Just being removed from their parents is trauma enough. Then you add to why they were removed from their parents. So there's definitely trauma there. And you're going to have behaviors and you're going to have feelings, and it's going to be a wild ride, but you're going to get attached to these kids. But then there's that unknown of, are they going to go back home? So there's sometimes that fear of getting too attached, because there is the possibility that they could go home. Like I said, it can be a wild ride, and there's just a lot of unknowns when it comes to the foster care portion, whereas when you get to the adoptive part, they do become a part of family. I don't think that trauma ever goes away, but hopefully it can be healed some. And then at that point, they're your forever family. They're yours. When you do adopt, you are making them a legal member of your family, and they have just as much right to an inheritance as your biological child. So like I said, it's way more permanent once the adoption is finalized, but it also kind of gives the sense of, okay, this is us moving forward, as opposed to having, are they going to go home? Are they not? What's the parents doing? And the kids are visiting, they're coming back with behaviors. I mean, so the foster care process itself, I mean, it's not for women. But if you can get to the point of either a successful reunification or an adoption, then you're going to be rewarded 100 times more.
So then what do you think would be some important factors when people are considering adoption? You've listed out some great ones for the foster side of it, but adoption-wise, do you see that there's different things to consider for how capable you might feel towards it? Does it make a difference if maybe you're a single person or if you're a couple? Like what are some things that someone should consider before diving into this?
I think it's just the same as if you're planning on, having a baby. You're at your own leisure. Are you ready for it? Are you prepared for it? Are you psychologically prepared for this? Like we said, now comes the time where if it's an adoptive placement, this is going to be final. Does this child fit in with the rest of your family, with your extended family? What are some of values that you have? Might be different from the child that was raised with different values, and just like Mandy said, trauma. You don't know all the trauma the child's been through. There could be triggers that set them off. You don't know, and you just have to be prepared and educated.
And like I mean, at that point, it is your child. Like, there's no takebacks. There's no. I mean, you're going to provide for that child and care for that child as if it was your own child. Um, when we do the adoption, when Jennifer and I work on adoptions, one of the things we do is go through, we go through all of the DCFS court or files and children's home files, and we go through psychologicals and services that the parents have done, and we will identify any, what's the word I'm looking for, Jennifer? Like things that
or things that have been passed down. Yeah.
Yes, pre-existing conditions in the children, as well as any mental health issues with the parents, any substance abuse issues with the parents, any medical diagnoses that the parents may have. We uncover all that and provide that to the adoptive parent, so they kind of know. I mean, and usually as you're fostering, you kind of figure it all out as well, but we definitely, as we go through the adoption process, want the adoptive parents to know that this is this kid's background. And there's a form that DCFS has us do for the adoptions. And I've always said it's a form born out of every lawsuit against DCFS, because one of the questions it says is that the adoptive parents understand that there can be undiagnosed medical conditions, mental health conditions, and whatnot. Because as much as Jennifer and I can put in those packets to inform those foster parents or adoptive parents of their family of origin issue and their personal diagnoses, whatnot, you just never know what you're going to get, which is kind of with a biological child too. I mean, we try and provide as much information as we can, but as a child ages, I mean, any biological child can have, mental health issues, whatnot. And at that point, once that adoption is completed, then it's your responsibility to access those services for that child.
So what are some ways that you see some people like showing support for these children? Like specifically, I guess, towards even the LGBTQ plus children. Like, what are some ways, like allyship, what's a way that someone that might not be in the community that is looking at helping these children, what's a way that they can help show their support and show up for these children?
Become foster parents. No, that would be, we would love it. We would absolutely love it. But I also think, I think if you have anybody in the LGBTQ community that is willing to even step forward, support some of these kids, we've got several right now that are doing some type of gender transition or identify as an opposite, a different gender. And I think the more support we can have for those kids, and I mean, the last slide too has our licensing person's contact information and my contact information, that if you would want just to be some type of support to an LGBTQ child, that we would love that. We would love to, connect you and to be a mentor and to answer questions and be supportive to them. Because, it's difficult in today's, well, we're not going to go political. It's difficult, I know, for LGBTQ folks. And, when you're younger, and adolescence sucks for everybody. I mean, so then, you couple that with, identifying as LGBTQ, and it just gets that much more difficult. And so if we could even, if anybody would want to step in, and they can contact me, and we can up with one that you can provide support or encouragement or education, whatnot. I mean, I'm all for that too.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, either contacting Mindy or Andrea to look into maybe forming a mentor program or something like that, or working with our licensed clinicians who provide therapy for these kids. That might be another opportunity to take a look at.
Yeah, because like I said, I mean, Illinois has a mandate that all, DCFS workers, private agency workers do have to do training for LGBTQ plus, but for the youth and care. But sometimes I think, first person experience shoots that out of the water sometimes. I really believe that. And I think, providing insight even to caseworkers and helping them, help the children, and that would be helpful also.
So what are some ways that you can see that people creating more like a safe space for children to be able to explore their gender or their sexuality? How do these needs look during different ages, between young and maybe teenage, and how do you typically see those needs addressed depending on their age?
Well, that's a good question. Um, and this probably sounds horrible, but there's a lot of times where you have these younger kids that are exploring, and a lot of times foster parents look at that as, oh my gosh, they've been sexually abused or they're sexually active, when sometimes it's just age appropriate exploring. I think where social services, even children's home caseworkers, can improve is letting these kids know that it's okay if they have feelings about gender, sexuality, whatnot, like, and for caseworkers to be open to discussing that. I think sometimes it can be a difficult subject for some workers, and so I think maybe providing support in that way, I think, is also important.
So then, following up, I don't know if it's following up necessarily, but just a follow-up question, and I think this is the last one that I have. Children growing up having maybe an LGBTQ plus parents of some sort, that they would, not be how the majority of children they go to school with their family might look different. Two fathers instead of like your typical nuclear family. What are some ways that you parents can help avoid making their child feel maybe alienated or isolated from other children, like their peers possibly?
I think a lot, how do I want to say this? Some of my most favorite and best foster parents I've ever worked with have been gay and lesbian couples with these children. A lot of times you will have biological parents that, when their child is placed with a gay or lesbian couple, the biological parents like, oh my God, we can't have that. I think it's important for the worker to explain and address those issues. I, I think casework support is going to be a huge part of it, especially if a child is placed with a gay or lesbian couple and they go to school and that's not something if they've come from a heterosexual two-parent to a gay or less those things, how do they identify themselves and with their parents at that point? Um, and I think that's, like I said, I think a lot of that is caseworker working through that with the children. I think, obviously we definitely have counseling services in place if a child um, is questioning, like, having two moms or two dads. We can put counseling in place. I think schools are another um, big support where, I mean, I think there's probably some schools that may not be as supportive, but hopefully you can have teachers. And I do think I think it is becoming more accepted. Um, we're not doing, Mother's Day and Father's Day things anymore. We're doing parents things, and so I think it's a mind shift and a cultural shift and a social shift. But then I do think, like I said, there's also, caseworkers and therapists and hopefully teachers and counselors that can, help those kids process through that.
So, last thing I'm going to ask is just, I guess, more of maybe, hopefully, a positive. Obviously, we know the political climate that we got going on, but that aside, what are some, how do you see adoption and foster care growing ideally? Like, where would you like to see things kind of move towards in the next, political stuff aside, in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years? How do you see things going, and what would you like to see out of the community?
Do you have any thoughts, Jennifer, before I get on my soapbox?
No, I just think more support for both parents, and more opportunities for them to get help before it gets to this point, in foster care and removal. There's not enough social services out there right now, substance abuse, mental health, domestic violence, things like that. We need to be able to help people, before we have to be reactive and be proactive with, some of these issues for folks. And when it does come to the point where foster care, again, we need to be cognizant of, they are out of their home. They don't have possibly their mother and father to cry on. They need assistance and understanding. And the school system is a big part of it too, I believe. As Mindy said, they have to be, recognize that these kids are removed from their homes. So they don't have, mom to make a flower for, or, dad to, make a Pinewood Derby car with, or, something like that. I just don't, see, well, I'd like to see the community and people come to rally, around folks and helping them to get things together and helping them to, receive the services that they need. So we might not have jobs. I don't know. That's a good thing. To be able to, keep families together.
And I will say, along those lines with Jennifer, we've both been doing this a long time, and I've talked with other coworkers that have been in the field for a long time, and like we're seeing more issues and more problems, not only with the biological parents, but the children coming into care. It's a need like we've never seen before. And like Jennifer said, I think our mental health services and substance abuse services for adults for children too, but adults mainly in the community, they're not there. And I think we're failing parents in not being able, like Jennifer said, to be proactive in providing them the supports they need. Like Jennifer said, it would be nice to not have a job and have to place kids in foster care and do adoptions, but unfortunately, because of the lack of resources, a lot of the children we see coming into care are generational. It's, their parents were in care, their grandparents were in care, and I think in order to really get a handle on it, I think the mental health services need to improve tremendously, and not just in our state, but throughout the whole country. But like I said, I do feel like Illinois, and things could change, but I do feel like Illinois is very um, kind of responsive to the need for mental health services, and it's a lot of red tape to get to it, and a lot of funding is needed, and we'll see how that funding plays out over the next 4 to 8 years, whatever. So
Well, thank you both very much. Are there any last thoughts that you want to give us before we wrap up for the evening?
I will share a funny story. So I had a kid that was transferred to children's home, and it wasn't even at the point of adoption or guardianship or anything yet. It was just a foster care placement. But he was placed in a home with children's home, and then he had siblings that were placed in a different home. And so the home that he was placed in, which was one of my all-time favorite homes, was a lesbian couple, and they both were named Sue. So when we first got the child into care and placed him in this home, the other agency was doing sibling visits. And I had something already going. And so one of the foster moms said she'd come pick him up. Well, she was running late. And so the person that was supervising the sibling visit said, here's her number if you need to call it, whatever. So she calls and she says, can I speak to Sue? And Sue says, this is Sue. And she goes, oh, well, are you coming to get the child? Well, yeah, she's on her way. And she's like, wait, what? She said, well, she's on her way. She's like, but I thought I'm talking to Sue. She said, you were talking to Sue. And it was just this roundabout, then finally figuring out, oh, they're both named Sue. But it made it very difficult to kind of figure things out. But honestly, the best foster parents I've ever worked with. If I could place every kid there, I would.
The classic, who's on first base?
Yeah, they're like, but this is Sue. Yeah, and she's on her way.
Yeah. Well, thank you both. You have both been incredible.
Well, thank you guys for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thoroughly enjoyed this.
And like I said, if you have other questions or interests, or like you said, maybe getting a mentorship program, feel free to reach out to me, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah. We have your information here. We also, I believe we have it posted on the event page for this as well.
Perfect.
And other than that, thank you very much. I don't want to clap too loud. It's just going to overload the mic. But thank you both very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
With that, we are going to bring this to a close.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.